Om Shanti, good morning. Akiben, would you like to share a few words before we begin?
Yes, Saurabh. Om Shanti. Good morning, everyone. Today being a Sunday, we shall be looking at uh, taking up the revisions of the Murli that we have read and studied in the last 2 days as we started the second innings on Friday. So Saurabh will take us through deep diving on the Murlis that we studied the last 2 days. Saurabh, over to you.
Thank you, Om Shanti. So, first of all, thank you for this opportunity to spend some time, especially with the Murlis of 1969 and the Murlis, very fresh Murlis when Brahma Baba became a Vyakt. And as we can see that as we are listening to these revised Murlis of early 1969, we can feel that how it's like the transition that happened in the Yajna and this whole transition of how things will be and how Yajna will be sustained and everything, and how Baba through the Murlis brought the attention back to the efforts. Baba was saying, like in the other day, that to churn the ocean of knowledge and not to churn the upheaval. Baba was mentioning how that this time is, to experience the Avyakt and celebrating a meeting in the Avyakt. And so doesn't it resonate well with the times that we are in right now, where there's another transition happening. And this transition to kind of allow ourselves to be navigated in these transitions, one thing that I always have felt is the power of realization of the fundamentals of Gyan. And so when we use the word Avyakt, when we use the word soul, when we use the word home, when we use the word subtle regions, when we use the word Paramdham, it's like there is a vibration behind these words. And so one is to use these words from a Lokik or from a Vyakt perspective in way of understanding them, which is fine. But then the other is to actually hold the Avyakt perspective and to experience them, to feel them. And the vibrations then are able to be felt in the Vyakt. Just like then Bap Dada from the Avyakt came into the Vyakt. In the same way, we souls from the Avyakt come into the Vyakt. And so a few years back, this whole kind of some reflections were happening on these words Vyakt and Avyakt. And an appropriate English translation which resonated with me were the words for Vyakt. The word that I felt resonated with me was visible, and Avyakt was invisible. So Vyakt is visible and Avyakt is invisible. And so holding the vibration of the Avyakt means holding the vibration of the invisible whilst coming into the visible. And so there were a few kind of reflections, and I thought maybe we could, go through them together and kind of see what we experience through those reflections. And they're all linked with these Murlis where Papa is, inviting us to explore this entire dimension of the Avyakt. Through, Baba saying that the gift of Baba, wanting us to be unshakable, and not seeing defects in anyone, always having the constant and stable stage. Baba was saying how the ashes remind us of the stage. And so what is that stage? And so if I really, think deeply, reflect deeply, that stage is basically the avyakt stage, the invisible stage. So if it's okay, there are a few slides that the thought was we could go through together, and then we could, share our perspectives. So Brahma Baba really made this effort from changing from vyakt to avyakt, from visible to invisible. And then when Bab Dada came back for Avyakt Muralis, then it's like being invisible in the visible, being Avyakt in the Vyakt. And so that's why whenever we see Dadiji, Dadi Gulzar, and in her chariot, Bab Dada, it's like the aura, the face, the demeanor, the way Baba would be so silent and still, and Baba's magnetic pull, it's like all that avyakt dimension, the invisible dimension, becoming very, very accessible to everyone. And so if we look into the word invisible, what does it really mean? So let's look into that. So it says power lies in the invisible. Power lies in the invisible. So if we really look at a very simple example, like the most powerful things in the universe are invisible. And so power is directly proportional to being invisible. For example, God, the supreme source, is invisible. A seed from which the entire tree grows is invisible. Atomic energy, which is the most powerful physical force, is also invisible. So as soon as I'm coming into the visible, it's as if I'm losing the power. And as soon as I'm paying attention to the invisible, it's like getting access to another dimension, a powerful dimension, the most precious and important things that matter in life. Feelings of belonging, feelings of love, feelings of respect are all invisible. Yes, air is invisible, right? If we look at this word invisible, we say the electricity through which we're all connected, or the internet through which I'm sitting here thousands of miles away and everyone is sitting, across the globe, and we're all able to, interact. And the way it happens, the power of the internet is also invisible. And because it is invisible, it is able to, just completely overcome the limitations of space, the limitations of time. And so whatever is invisible holds the power. And that's why, Baba is inspiring us to experience the invisible, because that's where the power lies. The more I come into the visible, the power kind of gets depleted. And so we generally tend to associate ourselves with the visible. Right. We generally tend to associate ourselves with the visible. Right. And that's what Baba says, the name and form, the disease of name and form, Baba says. What is it? It's the visible. It's like, when we say a lot of waste thoughts or whatever Maya or the illusion, it's all about, the job of the Maya or the illusion is to bring us into the visible. And then whatever I'm thinking is all linked to the visible world. And so this is something that I really experimented with is, so whenever a thought comes and something is bothering me, for example, or it's not allowing me to deepen my yoga, and I would just ask myself that whatever I'm thinking right now, does it belong to the visible or does it belong to the invisible? And if the answer is visible, then I think, okay, it's not important. Let me let go of it. And in an instant, it's as if like a weight is lifted off my shoulders, and the soul completely feels that invisible. Yes, that invisible dimension is what is true. Param Dham is invisible, the soul is invisible, Baba is invisible, Baba's remembrance is invisible, our divine virtues are invisible, our qualities are invisible. Everything, actually, if we see, is invisible. And many times when we say, bhakti versus gyan, bhakti is trying to make things more and more visible. And even after coming into gyan, we may be operating from that intellect where, I like to take things into visible. And I like to see how it, which is fine, to a certain extent, but to be trapped in it or to be lost in it, that's where we lose the plot. So it says actions are visible, so we tend to take our self-respect from them. And that's why many times we, judge maybe ourselves or others by the actions that they perform, because that's what is the interaction of the soul with the visible world. So where is it that I'm basing my self-respect in? Is it the visible or the invisible? So this name, this role, this everything, it's the visible is completely different. And that's why, like, after spending some time with Baba and in the spiritual path, sometimes it's like we may want to look spiritual. It's like we may want to be seen as spiritual. We may want to be acknowledged as spiritual, right? Which is again kind of a trap of Maya, where the other day we were discussing, am I spiritual or am I a spirit? I'm a spirit, and all of us are spirits. And so this word spiritual, sometimes it could bring in that element of a very, very deep or hidden kind of ego. And we call it spiritual ego. And that again comes when I identify myself with the way I'm perceived, or the way I come across. So again, all of this leads to drainage of the power. And so the whole perspective is to shift everything, every thought, every word, every action, every dimension of my persona to the invisible. And so just like Bab Dada, if we just look into Baba's eyes, the drishti, the soul is transported into the invisible world, because Baba stays there naturally. Baba doesn't take any self-respect from any actions that he performs. Once someone asked Dadi Gulzar, Dadiji, Baba comes in you, and this is such a great thing that Baba comes in you. How do you feel about it? How do you feel about it? And then Dadi Gulzar just said, oh, that is Dadi's part. That is just a part. Dadi doesn't take any self-respect from it. It's like Baba wanted someone to be used, and Baba has used this chariot, and that's all. It's like her thought process was never based on the role, even the spiritual role. Mm. And so she always stayed in the invisible. Mm. Mhm. Someone is saying, isn't my thoughts invisible? But I sometimes make it real and visible, especially waste thoughts, even though I know it's absolutely absurd. Mhm. And then someone was saying this, and this beautiful realization that, we say waste thoughts or negative thoughts are real, their consequences are real, but they are born out of an illusion. They're born out of an illusion. The illusion that anything that is in the visible world belongs to me, the soul. Because the truth is, not even a single atom in this visible world belongs to me. I cannot take anything whatsoever with me when I leave this body. Mm. Mhm. Mhm. Right. And so we say the power lies in the visible, and also reality. What we say reality is also in the invisible. Mm. So if I really, reflect on it, uh, how can we define reality? What is reality? Maybe something that is permanent, is real, right? Unconditional and unending. Anything that we can see in the world, in the physical world, is subject to change. The only thing constant in this world is change. Everything is changing in this world. And so, because it is changing, it is not permanent, it is not unconditional, it is not unending. So, it is not real. Mm. The mind always wants to get absorbed in feelings of happiness, ecstasy, and bliss. And that's what we are ultimately aiming for through anything, any effort that we make. But having lost touch of the eternally blissful state of being, that is the invisible, the eternal, the invisible, we base our happiness in unreal things. It's a paradox. We are real, as souls, we are real. We want to feel real. That is the real feelings of the soul. But we try to feel it in the unreal, that is the visible world. So, right now, let us just take a moment to create two distinct worlds in our minds. One is the visible world, which is the unreal world, that includes the character that I play, and that includes all the activities. Even right now, whatever is happening on Zoom, or we are listening to something, we are watching something, it's all in the visible dimension. And then the other is the invisible dimension of the soul, of Baba, of my home of light. That's what is the reality. And the other side is fiction. It's a story. It is happening. It is. So let me make this distinction very, very clear. So I know that when I come into the visible world, I come to just enjoy. But my feelings are not based in the visible world. They are based in the invisible world. That is the real world. So reality is in the invisible. God's treasures are unlimited, invisible, and real. I just need to stay in the invisible to experience them. I need to stay in the invisible to experience them. How do I experience constant blissful state, being absorbed, the lovely stage? In Baba, one of the recent Murlis, Baba was sharing how to experience the lovely stage even whilst performing actions. So how do I do that? It's like the more I just hold on to that invisible state, that's who I am, invisible. Nothing of the visible world pulls me down. I've escaped the gravity of the visible dimension. Like an astronaut, I'm beyond space and beyond time and beyond limitations in my real world, in my invisible world. It's just I, the soul, and Baba, and that's all. There's nothing else that the soul needs. And this experience of the reality can only happen in Baba's presence. And so right now, let us take a moment and just drop completely everything of the visible world. And in this moment, it's just Baba and I, the soul. And Baba's loving, endearing presence. And this is the reality. Everything else is fiction. It doesn't matter. If someone says something or not, it doesn't matter. If things happen the way I planned or not, it doesn't matter. If I get respected or not, it doesn't matter. Nothing really matters because it is unreal, because it belongs to the visible dimension. The only thing that is real is I, the soul, and Baba. And from this perspective, if I then look into the whole aspect of service, and if I really look into it, we say visible service and invisible service. Now, in theory, we all understand what is visible service and what is invisible service. But to really digest this fully, invisible service, so it's not just about, just visible on the physical level, but in visible service, our intentions are to be visible in the eyes of others through the service that we perform. So the intentions are to become visible. True service is to move towards the invisible. Maya's job is to bring us to the visible, right? And so the visible service where, whatever we do, the intention is to become visible. And it may not be very obvious, but still hidden somewhere. It's important to spot it and to recognize it and to let go of it. It often drains out the spiritual energy. It drains out the spiritual energy. The more service is limited by these intentions. It drains out the spiritual energy. True service, real service is invisible. One that is a pure flow of spiritual energy from the source into the world. And so there is really no role of the soul in a true spiritual service. Service is just a flow of God's light, God's love, God's powers into the world. The soul is just a conduit, nothing else. It is completely invisible. Invisible service is unlimited and instantly reaches out to all the invisible souls. And that's why it's not just, when we say Mansa Seva, it's not just, sitting and then spreading vibrations. It's holding on to the purity of the intentions. That I stay in the invisible and stay with Baba. And I just allow Baba's light. Just allow Baba's light to pass through the soul into the world. So invisible service is unlimited and instantly reaches out to all the invisible souls. Yes. Invisible service uplifts the soul exponentially, whereas visible service is like a spiral down. We feel we are doing good, but in reality, Maya, the illusion, pulls us exponentially into the visible world and its traps. And that's where Baba says, Nirvighn Seva. Many Murlis Baba says, Nirvighn Seva. And so Seva can also bring the soul into Vighan, obstacles. If the Seva is taking the form of a visible, it's like taking a visible form. And so this purity of intention, we all have been taking up the subject of purity, complete purity. What is complete purity? Where there is nothing of the visible world which is contaminating my invisible reality. It's just a pure flow happening. Baba, and then through Baba, everything is getting done. And the soul is not coming into picture. And that's where we see, when we see Dadis, and we admire them so much, because just their presence would bring Baba. And the reason was they had made themselves so incognito that it's like their personality, their thing had completely been hidden. It's only Baba is invisible. Only Baba is visible. And so as Baba, through the 69 Murlis, is inspiring us to experience that Avyakt dimension. So service is a very important part, especially of our life, Brahmin life, because every moment we are serving. Everything is service, right? That's what been discussed. But invisible service is what takes the soul into the Avyakt stage. And visible service brings the soul down into the Avyakt stage. And so the practice of being invisible, switching the reset button. Just in our computers, we have a reset button. In our phones, we have a reset button. So here also, I take a moment to switch off the visible world and experience the invisible. Get soaked up into the feelings of truth and bliss, and then switch on to the visible world of action. This practice is much like resetting the computer when it freezes, and I'm able to stay detached and unaffected. And so we often hear stories of dadis and mama and baba where they would say the physical world doesn't really exist for them. They just come here whenever there is service needed and then perform the task and then go back. In one of the recent Murlis in January this year, Baba said the essence of the study is to come and go. And so the reset button. See, right now, if we just take a moment to push that reset button. So I switch off the visible world. And so nothing of the body, the world of the body remains. It's just I, the soul, the point of light. And completely soaked up in Baba's world, Baba's presence. And from there, then I slowly switch on the visible world, the world of actions. And so this practice, what Baba calls it as drills, Baba would say, Bacche videhi ban jao. So these drills are what allow us to stay in the Avyakt stage and not lose the perspective. Murli, Murli. Whether it is Sakar Murli or Avyakt Murli, and especially these Murlis of 69, the intention of the Murli is to train the mind to see the invisible, to experience the invisible. The mind is trained from childhood and from so many births to see the visible. Everything is to see the visible, to experience the visible. These impressions of the visible world are what have been stored in the form of old sanskars. What are old sanskars? These impressions of the visible world. Everyday Murli is a guidance from the Supreme Teacher to understand his perspective of seeing the invisible. And that's why, when Baba says asthi sthiti, so whatever is visible is the asthi, but the invisible, the intention is to make our sthiti. So this is how Baba is seeing it. So Baba is not just focusing on the visible. And so Baba is saying, okay, now it's the time for you to become Avyakt and come to me, meet me in the subtle regions. When I feel that everything that is visible belongs to Baba, then so everything that is visible, so this body, this, everything, whatever is visible, it belongs to Baba. It doesn't belong to me. Then it brings supreme respect in my attitude and interactions, and I begin to cherish the presence of every person and scene in my life as a gift from Baba. Isn't it Jivan Mukti, liberation in life? Because everything, whatever I'm seeing, it belongs to Baba. But I've been given the privilege to spend time with it, to use it. And so it's a gift given by Baba to me. And so there is automatically the feeling of cherishing it, respecting it, everyone, everything, every scene, unconditionally. And this is Jivan Mukti. And so let me look forward to every day's Murli and the Murlis that we're revising as a way to train my mind to see the invisible from a new perspective. So when I make this effort, once I've read or listened to the Murli, then based on my feelings and realizations, and how can I develop a new perspective to see the invisible and then come closer to the aim of living an invisible life, a Vyakt life, what Baba is hoping from us, to stay in the invisible, the Avyakt. Cha, Om Shanti. Thank you, Baba. Thank you, family. Just a few thoughts that came when Rakhi Bennett requested to share today. Maybe I'll just end with this thought here. Is like, Baba always wants some newness, some aim, some objective. And so if we look at this last few months left of this year, the year of completion and revelation, Sampannata, Sampurnata, and Pratyakshita. And so when we see that Baba became invisible in 1969 and made his children visible in this world, Baba became invisible. And this year is the year for us to become invisible and make Baba visible in this world. So only when all of us become invisible, the method is to use Baba's Avyakt Murlis every day to gain a new perspective and to reinforce that perspective to become invisible. And when we do that together, we are becoming invisible. And when we are becoming invisible, Baba is becoming more and more visible. So with that thought, let me just put a little pause and invite any thoughts or sharings from everyone. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. While you were sharing this last slide, and if we connect to the visible and the invisible world, uh, Baba made his children Vyakt after 1969 across the globe. The sevas in the foreign nations started only after that, and we all have seen how it has grown. And now, in 2022, when Baba says that make Baba visible and you become invisible, now that's the sthiti that we all aim to. And as you rightly stated, this thing of asti and sthiti, I would invite you to give us some insight on how the asti and the sthiti can be can be practiced. What are the various methods which can be easy for one to look at? Because what I was getting while you were saying this is asti is the body consciousness, and the sthiti is the space of being soul consciousness. Over to you to help us understand this, Saurabh.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you, Rakiben. And yeah, Baba in the last Murli, I believe 23rd or 22nd of January of 69, mentioned these words Asthi and Sthiti. And, I know many of us know that the Tower of Peace actually is where, Brahma Baba's asthis, that ashes are kept. And on those ashes is the tower is being built. And that's why, whenever we go there, the power of that, the magnetic force of that place creates our stage. And because Brahma Baba's that asthi have become an instrument for us to create our sthiti. So asthi is like, the ashes, the final ashes. It's like to the extent that I'm ready to, completely, burn. When Baba says, Ansh and Vansh, the trace and the expansion. And so many times Baba would say that make sure that you have burnt the trace, burnt the Ansh. Because if the Ansh is not burnt, Vansh will get created. And so real Asthi is where I have really burnt away the seed of body consciousness in Baba's remembrance, in the fire of yoga. And when it is really burnt away, when it is completely burnt down to ashes, that's what then creates the sthiti, the stage, the avyakt stage. And so burning in the fire of yoga, burning in the fire of yoga. And, we see in dadis, we see in mama. Let me show this one slide again. As we say, staying in the invisible, staying in the invisible, which is the fire of yoga. The asthi gets created when it's completely burned. And so I stay in the fire. It's the essence of all our efforts is to let the consciousness completely stay in the visible, for it not to be pulled into this visible world, including the Brahmin world and its expansions, because that's also part of the visible world. How to allow it to happen in an easy and natural way. How to allow it to happen in an easy and natural way. And this is where there's one thought that comes here. Like if we have to convert anything visible into invisible, that is to change its form, what do? We need to put it into fire. When I put something into fire, it completely changes the form. That's why we call ourselves as being sustained by Baba's yajna or the sacrificial fire. Because fire where the form is changed. And so yajna is where the form is completely changed. We need to let our consciousness burn in Baba's love. Burning in Baba's love. It's like there's nothing else, says lagan, me magan. Milan, Lagan, Magan, Agan. So it's nothing else but Baba visible. There should be no one else and nothing else of the visible world but just Baba. Just Baba. And Jagdish Bhai once said in one of his classes that it's very easy to become tireless servers. And I really, resonated with what he said. He said, okay, Athak Sevadari, and we can easily become tireless servers, but he said we need to become tireless tapasvis, Athak Tapasvi. Our love for Baba should be deep, very deep, so much so that we can feel it in our every breath, in every heartbeat, and in every drop of our blood. If there's nothing but Baba visible to us, then we can easily become invisible. If there's nothing but Baba visible to us, then we can easily become invisible.
Bhai, Shanti, are we able to get a copy of your slides or a link where we can just get these slides? Because I'd like to reread them again and again.
Sure, yeah, I can send it to Rakhi Ben and she can send it to everyone.
She can forward it in the group. Maybe other
Sure.
people can also benefit rather than just me. And
Sure.
one question I had was, when you, obviously it'd be good if you could end with a meditation on being invisible. But when you go to Param Dham, that was one practice that you had suggested. Should we be seeing three souls, like Shiv Baba, Brahma Baba, and yourself as a soul, or just Baba and you? That's how I sort of understood. It's Baba and you in Param Dham. Do you mind clarifying that for me? Just comes from what I heard yesterday.
Right.
Or that it doesn't matter.
Yeah, to me, I feel that, it's more about feeling the presence. It's like feeling that someone is close to you, that some love and someone who loves the soul, and they're actually the only one who loves the soul, because everyone else loves the role. No one knows about it, right? And there's the only one who talks to the soul. Murli is when Baba talks to the soul. Everyone else talks to the role. No one talks to the soul. And so the one, literally the only one. So feeling the presence of that one.
Of
It
that
could
one.
mean, I can see as a point of light, or I cannot see, but just the feeling of it, the presence of it.
Yeah.
And that feeling is what kind of then creates that fire, or gives rise to that ignition.
Yes. So as I understand, it's Baba and you, no one else in the middle. And just feeling that love and that bond that you would feel as a mother and child, or a parent and child, I guess. At least one of those relationships. And if Param Dham, sitting in Param Dham is one practice to become invisible with the fire of love, what would be other drills that you would say, like you said, come and go, come and go? So while you are coming here to do action, you go back to Param Dham again. So to me, it seems like there is one supreme abode. So that is where we should be going to become invisible.
Right.
The function of the subtle region being, how would you put the subtle region in perspective of that?
So subtle regions is where, this whole, we say this transformation, it's like, we say the physical is, we say body, right? Physical body.
Yep.
And the Param Dham is just the being of light in a seed. And then the subtle is where, we say is the subtle or the angelic. This is where the subtle regions is what, we say Baba, gives us access to only to us Brahmins. And subtle regions is where, we can really feel Bab Dada's presence, in Paramdam, we feel Shiv
Baba.
Baba, completely
Mhm.
Shiv. In a subtle region, it's more
Both.
like, yeah, the feeling of mother, the feeling of father. It's like, the feeling where in the subtle form we can feel, Bap Dada together.
Mhm.
And for me, for me, subtle regions have been a transition that allows. So in subtle regions, it's like the soul completely feels that love, that conversations, Rurihan with Bap Dada, that completely allows the soul to forget the old world. And once that state is reached, then slowly the soul is pulled into Paramdam.
Okay. Propelled to Paramdam.
Yes, it's kind of propelled, where the soul then leaves the subtle costume and just the soul with Baba, Shiv Baba. And so it's then a magnet pull of Shiv Baba that holds the soul there. Right.
Yep. So you feel that the journey to Paramdam is through the subtle region. That's how I understand it. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm. So that
Yeah.
would happen every time you come and go?
It's like, it's very natural thing. So it may or may not, but in general, that's the, kind of the way. It doesn't, it's not right or wrong, one
Yeah.
way or the other. But it's
It's a
more
matter
like,
of the feeling,
yeah,
like you said. At the end of the
yeah,
day, if you're feeling it, it doesn't really matter what technique you're using.
correct. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
It's the feeling that tells you whether you're doing it correctly or not.
Yeah,
So
right.
from that come and go, like I said, I know I'm taking time because I just felt this was just very, very important for me. And it was base foundation. So the other question I had was, what are other techniques apart from going to Paramdham via the subtle region?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, one thing that I feel that works for me is would many a time just, see the globe from a distance.
Mm-hmm.
It's like an astronaut, right? Like
Yes.
astronaut would see the globe, and that perspective actually helps me a lot. And I'll say, oh, this is a globe, and there are 8 billion souls, and in those 8 billion souls, there is one soul, and he's playing the role of Saurabh, and he has a story, and there are 8 billion stories in that world. And out of those 8 billion stories, there is one story, that is of this character called Saurabh. And that's what I have to enact now. That's all. And so it just puts things into perspective. It doesn't mean the story of Saurabh is very important and extremely valuable. No. It's just the 8 billion stories out there. And it's happening. And I, the soul, is witnessing it.
Thank you. If anyone else knows of any, I'm happy to, I'm all ears.
Shanti. I would like to share a few of my ideas on the first slide, that is invisibility and power. And three things came to my mind. First one was a person lying on the surgery table who has been given anesthesia. You see, the person is invisible. That allows him to transcend through the pain of the disease through a surgery so easily that once the surgery is over, the person is disease free. Neither the surgeon visible to him, neither are the assistants visible to him. More or less, no pain is visible to the individual, no pain felt. That transcends the individual from going from a disease process to wellness. So that was one thing that came to my mind. And second was the state, the current state of science, the weapons that are being generated. Everybody talks about stealth aircrafts, stealth ships, stealth UAVs, and things like that. Nobody wants to be visible. And through that invisibility, people would like to gain power. They want to overpower another country and the place, and that shows their power to be dominant on this earth. So that's the power that invisibility carries. And the last one was we had a movie called Mr. India in India many years ago, wherein film actor Anil Kapoor would be invisible and carry out number of things for the country. It saved number of things basically, um, transforming bad to good. So these three things came to my mind when I was listening to the first slide. So yes, brother, the words are very correct. Invisibility does carry power. Thank you, Om Shanti.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Vinod-bhai. Appreciate.
Adding on to what sharing is going on, if we go to our emotions and feelings, they are also invisible, and yet they have their own impact and consequences in the visible world.
Right. Yes.
It's finally what I experience is the vibration. And the invisible, pure vibration, it makes you feel happy, pure, connected to the divine. And when the vibration is not pure, you can sense it in a subtle way, you can sense. And then you use Baba's power to actually make it pure again, so that you are always in a very stable, peaceful, loving state. Om Shanti.
Quickly, can I ask if there's time? If there's no time, please don't feel that you need to. About the surgery that the person was talking about, lying on the surgery table and transcending, how he achieves that, or how you go about achieving that, please.
Sister, I was mentioning wherein the individual has been given anesthesia. I was not mentioning about the transition from that stage, from the lying and people, having out of body experience. I was just talking about physical invisibility. The individual would have been induced with an agent, he would have just closed eyes. Had there been 10 people around a lying person, a person would be a lot more conscious and be feeling the pain. But in this case, the individual is just lying, eyes closed, and is allowing another person to act on him. So that separation from visibility to invisibility gives him the courage to go through the process of surgery easily. So, what you mentioned, yes, there have been reports which say that there have been out of body experiences, and yes, they have gone through such a thing, but yes, in my I have not experienced any such personally, but that may be true as well. I'm sure.
Brother, my experience is it's definitely true. I will not take much time. Maybe in some other session. I have experienced it multiple times, and it's 100% true. Om Shanti.
In the interest of time, Saurabh, we invite you to take meditation before we close the session.
Sure. Yeah. Wonderful sharings, everyone. Thank you. Let's maybe take a few moments to experience the invisible dimension. We realize that there is a visible part to everything. The visible, which is part of the story, the fiction. And then the invisible is what drives the visible. Power lies in the invisible. The invisible is real. It's eternal. It's unending, permanent. And so in my mind, I create a clear contrast between the visible life, the visible part of the life that I'm living, and the invisible. As if there is a clear line that differentiates the two. The visible is the Vyakt, and the invisible is the Avyakt. I know that I am invisible. My reality is in the Avyakt. As a being of light, in Baba's presence, this is all what there is to life. Everything else really doesn't belong to me. It keeps on changing, and nothing is permanent. The only permanent relationship is my relationship with Baba. And so let me take this time to soak in Baba's presence, Baba's love. I allow my heart to resonate with Baba's, as if there is no one else, nothing else that matters. In this fire of love, Baba makes me invisible, just a soul without a root, completely pure. I don't need anything from the story. Having become invisible, Baba sends me back into the visible world. Spread the vibrations of the Avyakt, the invisible, in this visible world. Om Shanti.
Om Shanti. Thank you, Saurabh, for the insightful
Thank you.
session. Thank you, all the divine families. See you tomorrow at 5 a.m. Have a happy day.
Om Shanti.